Judge Juan Merchan, a former prosecutor, was first appointed to be a judge in Bronx Family Court by Mayor Bloomberg. Former prosecutor and defense attorney Imran Ansari thinks Trump should feel good about having Merchan handling his case. The former president made it clear he believed Judge Merchan hates him.
Although Trump may say he thinks that this judge hates him, there's no evidence or no prior history in the record to show that Judge Merchan has any animus to Donald Trump.
President Trump and his lawyers are demanding that Judge Juan Merchan be removed because his daughter is a political consultant for Democrats. Lauren Merchan is listed as president and partner in the political consulting firm Authentic Campaigns. Authentic does tens of millions of dollars of work for Democrats and progressive causes. Authentic boasts its clients include President Biden, Vice President Harris, California Senate candidate Congressman Adam Schiff, who you may recall helped lead the congressional investigations into Trump, and even squad member Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, among many other prominent Democrats.
There's no evidence or no prior history in the record to show that Judge Merchan has any animus to Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is following the same playbook he does for all of these trials, criminal or civil, where he doesn't just attack the judge, he attacks the judge's family. And then part of Donald Trump's playbook is he relies on some of his closest supporters and followers to spread the conspiracy so Trump could have plausible deniability in spreading the disinformation. And then he leans into it to engage in stochastic terrorism and attack essentially the judge's family members. And we're seeing it right here with Justice Juan Merchan's daughter.
His daughter has been in the news, and then he puts a gag order on the president saying that he can't talk about this. That's his First Amendment right, his right to defend himself publicly about these allegations. I think that's one of the most egregious things, frankly, that's happened in this case. He absolutely needs to recuse himself.
His daughter has a financial interest in the outcome of her dad's case, because she and her clients, she runs a firm that raises money for politicians, has made out to the tune of some $93 million, according to the New York Post, by promoting and soliciting money by citing her father's case. That's a violation of judicial ethics. It demands recusal by the judge.
He refused to recuse himself. He denies any conflict of interest involving his daughter.
The judge won't recuse himself. He should. I don't think there's enough time to get him removed through an order by the higher court. And this is the weakest of all cases, but you've got a New York jury that hates Trump and a biased judge.
Donald Trump's bond in that New York fraud case. Letitia James who is the Attorney General there. She is objecting to the bond company. I want to get now to Ben Meiselas from the Meiselas Network for the latest on this news.
I had interesting professional experiences where I interned for P. Diddy, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, when I was, in my early 20s at that time.
Okay, so you interned for Diddy and Hillary? I mean, at separate times, obviously. Is that right? Is that what you said?
P. Diddy had a nonprofit called Citizen Change, which had a campaign called Vote or Die. So I ran the events for Vote or Die, and that introduced me to politics. And
Ben, what is going on here?
This dude that you're about to hear from is from the Midas Touch. It's a LibNut website that all they do is loathe about Donald Trump.
Well, the bond company that you and I talked about on the last video together, Knight Specialty Insurance Company, doesn't have the adequate assets to be a surety, it appears, in the state of New York.
He's just laughing. Obviously, he hasn't done his homework. He doesn't understand how surety bonds work. They don't have to be licensed in the state of New York. They just have to put up the bond. And yes, they do have the assets. He could have just went to their website and seen what the assets are.
But the Trump Organization says the bond is fully backed by cash, and AG James is just continuing what is a harassment campaign.
Donald Trump was unable to post his own cash in order to post a bond to stay the enforcement of the judgment in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case. So Trump goes around, I'm so rich, I've got all of this cash.
Right.
Well,
don't forget, the ruling from Engoron, the $500 million plus or minus original ruling, was already ruled on 6 months ago by the appellate division. They said that 2/3 of the entire thing that he was talking about was thrown out 6 months ago. So he just decided to ignore the higher court, the appellate division, and the great legal scholars on television are just conveniently ignoring all of that. So the ruling that they want is the one that just totally ignores the appellate division, not today, but 6 months ago that threw these things out. They're basically just reaffirming that, getting it back down to that number while we go through the appeals process.
Then he tries to get he gets kind of let off the hook a little bit by the appellate court, which allows him to reduce the bond from $464 to $175, which, again, if you're so rich, you should have $175 million.
I mean, $175 million when the alleged victim for the alleged crime is on the stand on behalf of us, saying not only were they paid back in full, but they made hundreds of millions of dollars. We never missed an interest payment. We never did this. This is nothing more than a political persecution. While obviously, at least with $175 million, you can post that bond in cash. The reality is bonding companies for private businesses, they've never even heard of a $500 million bond. And again, especially when the alleged victim is testifying on your behalf.
Then he goes to his friend, this guy Don Hankey, who runs Knight Specialty Insurance.
So he's never met Trump. Does he have any type of relationship with Donald Trump that you know of, that he mentioned?
He just said he'd supported him politically, but that was the extent of it.
Then he goes to his friend, this guy Don Hankey, who...
The company's chairman, Don Hankey, reportedly a billionaire, he supported the former president and even donated to his campaign, but he said the decision to underwrite the bond for Trump was ultimately about growing his company.
What is normal is the concept of a surety. Despite all of the times where Donald Trump says there's never been a bond like this before, this doesn't exist.
This is an excess carrier. As long as it has sufficient capital, and it does, over $1 billion in equity, then it's approved to issue Trump's bond.
Think about it like this, Don. Donald Trump violated the law in a case involving the New York Attorney General, committed civil fraud in the way he does business.
The judge, the appellate court ordered a TRO, which is a stay in the case, which means there's a substantial likelihood that President Trump will be successful on the merits in this case.
I mean, you've got Letitia James, Attorney General of New York, you would say arguably with some things to lose. I mean, gonna get Trump. I mean, who does that? That's so low class, but you know what it is? It's not fair. It's not fair in our legal and justice system to behave that way.
It's a really good point. It's not fair, but Letitia James is playing to her audience, right? You have a left-wing political base in New York City, and they love. I mean, she won on the fact that she promised to go after Donald Trump, right? That was the political message, and she
but she's still talking.
But she delivered on that promise, and I think New Yorkers still love it.
This case will get reversed, and yes, the bond was posted. She's just trying to stay relevant right now.
Now he's engaged in financial shenanigans, it would be me putting it very generously, in order to deal with the bond in a case where he's been found liable for fraud.
By the way, that is a lie.
Now he's engaged in financial shenanigans in order to deal with the bond.
We put a deal together in a few days. It's a big bond for us to underwrite, but Donald Trump came up with all cash. So at the end, it was an easy decision and with almost no risk.
Donald Trump was bailed out by the appellate division, who gave him a little bit of extra time. And when you give him
it was $400 and some million, and then they reduced it to 175.
Here's the thing,
right?
though,
It was
with
like
Donald Trump in
$450
general,
million.
if you give him an inch, he will take your life. That's how he treats you. You give him an inch, he takes you for a sucker, he doesn't think twice about it, he screws you over and will leave you out to dry.
Donald Trump came up with all cash. So at the end, it was an easy decision and with almost no risk.
Oh, and it's almost like they're proud of how absurd the verdict is, and they want everybody to realize how unfair and ridiculous it is.
In the appellate division, the real issue is by them not being tough, the message it sends to him, all right, I'll get my buddy Don Hankey to come in, and Hankey will help me out here.
Does he have any type of relationship with Donald Trump?
He just said he'd supported him.
And then even if Hankey doesn't have the money, we'll just create a mess here. That's why Trump knows strength.
He's lying right there. When he said that Trump didn't have the money, you use a bond so you don't have to use your own money. So if Trump has $175 million, which the owner of the company has already confirmed, then it makes it an easy deal for the bond company. You won't have to use your own money. That's the objective with everything Trump's been trying to do. If you have to take $175 million and put it into the court, that's $175 million you can't use. By using a bond, you still have access to your own $175 million.
Let me ask you something, because isn't he entitled to that? Because as I understand, bond is not supposed to be punitive. It's just supposed to make sure that you're going to show up, that you actually have the funds, that you're going to abide by whatever the court rules or whatever is happening next until this is adjudicated till the end.
That's wrong. You're thinking about, and what you're presupposing, and what Donald Trump is putting out there is that this is like a criminal bond, like a Bernie Madoff bond, or somebody who has to show. That's not what this is.
The Eighth Amendment: excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. That's the Eighth Amendment. Excessive fines. I mean, you know what he did? I think he looked at my cash and he said, well, we'll take all of his cash.
Presupposing, and what Donald Trump is putting out there is that this is like a criminal bond.
There have been some court cases saying that excessive fines could apply not only when it's a criminal fine, but also a fine or a judgment in a civil case. If the amount of money that's in the judgment is just way out of proportion to the offense that's found. And that's where you could at least argue that this might apply to Mr. Trump's situation.
The Eighth Amendment prevents the imposition of excessive bail or excessive fines. And if there's ever an example that meets that to a T, it's the bond that's been demanded of Donald Trump in this disgusting New York Letitia James-led prosecution.
This is a civil case, not a criminal case. And in a civil case, the law, it's not about punitive. It's just if you want to avail yourself of an appeals process and stay the enforcement of a civil judgment, then you have to post a bond that is equal to the civil judgment plus 10%.
James, this law was intended as a consumer protection law for clients or defendants that didn't have access to the usual amount of money or influence, and they could sue then people who had greater authority and had harmed them. It was never envisioned for anything like this. So,
and that's why you're such a successful lawyer. And by the way, commentator, because you explained it all very concisely. But
Nigga, please. Trump is 100% innocent in this. It can't be fraud because who is it against? When I'm in a contract negotiation, I can pretty much present anything I want because the other side will assess it and come back with their number, and then we agree. There's nothing hidden in a contract. Nobody is that stupid. But if you don't work in contracts, you don't know this. I think this is all an act to keep Trump off his game. Yeah. That's all this is.
How much more does this add onto the case, and how much more time? You know, you understand what I'm saying?
So I don't think this appeals process will ever be done before the election at all. I think the appeals process will take 9 months to a year to sort itself out regardless. But the idea is the adjudication already happened. Right? In the New York Attorney General civil fraud case, Trump was found to have committed fraud. The 464 is based on the financial fraud. The same way in the E. Jean Carroll case, Donald Trump was found liable.
E. Jean Carroll, that was a bill of attainder, basically. As somebody in the New York legislature passed a bill with Trump in mind that said for 1 year, the statute of limitations on long ago sexual assault will be waived, and then suddenly she refiled. So it seems like they got the target first, and then they manipulated or redefined the laws to make sure that he could be prosecuted.
And ultimately, if an appeals court finds differently, that's the system of justice that we have. But here's the thing, Don, and I'll leave you with this. Trump wants to destroy the system that we have. I like our system generally. That's what I studied. I'm a student of it. I literally teach law school. But what Trump wants to do with these games is he puts his middle finger to the system and wants to break it down. And that, to me, is, again, not a Democrat or Republican thing. It's somebody who just doesn't like the rule of law in Donald Trump.
There's not a single legitimate charge among them. He's attacked by the Attorney General of New York, who is a left-wing reprobate and campaigned as a left-wing reprobate, on a fraud statute that doesn't require fraud, on a fraud statute that doesn't require anybody claiming fraud, on a fraud statute that's never been used before in the history of the state of New York. It seems to me if you're going to go after a presidential candidate, a former president, that you ought to have something more than this statute. Then we move to Manhattan. We have this guy, Alvin Bragg. Alvin Bragg takes up a case that his predecessor would not. Cyrus Vance, a left-wing elected Democrat, said no. The Southern District of New York said, no, we don't want to touch that. And what is this case? This case is an attempt to take a business reporting, turn it into a federal campaign violation, the way Jack Smith did against John Edwards. The jury in North Carolina threw all the charges out. They twisted federal law, the federal election law, and that's exactly what Alvin Bragg's doing. But worse, he's twisting state law to take what he accuses Trump of, a misdemeanor, turning it into a felony by trying to hook in federal election law. Now, I know this sounds complicated, but what I want you to get out of this is the extent to which they are rewriting laws, twisting laws, making laws in order to get Trump. None of this is fair and square.
But what Trump wants to do with these games is he puts his middle finger to the system and wants to break it down.
You would think if they had a case of insurrection, sedition, or violence, they'd bring it. But that's not Jack Smith. That's not the Department of Justice. What did they do? They had to find crimes, some of which are never filed against anybody, again, to bring against Donald Trump. So none of these cases are serious in terms of the law. They're serious in terms of tying up Donald Trump on time, interfering with the election, every damn one of them. And more information's coming out that the Biden White House is behind it all. Bragg, Fannie, even Smith, they've all, in one form or another, consulted with the White House. Isn't that a problem?
I am your voice.
I interned for P. Diddy.